Hey friends, what's going on? This is Andy at Duranglers, and today we're going to be tying my favorite swing fly for trout, the Karl Malone. I call it the Karl Malone because I had a dream, pipe dream maybe, of once tying and designing a family of Trout Spey flies, all named after the 1992 Barcelona Dream Team. Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, John Stockton, Chris Mullin, if you remember him. Anyway, started here, Karl Malone. His nickname was the Mailman. The reason for that was the mailman always delivers. This is one of my favorites. If I'm throwing a Trout Spey rod, 90% of the time, this is the fly I'm throwing. So, fairly easy, but a few little tricks and techniques hopefully you can pick up on. Try it out. Swing it on a single-hander. It's pretty lightweight. Throw it on a two-hander, 3-4 weight, and catch a few fish. Let me know what you think. Alright, so the Karl Malone is a fairly simple pattern with a few materials and steps. First of all, we're going to put some dumbbell eyes on there. What hook I'm currently using is a 3x long size 6 streamer hook. The Daiichi 1720 fits the bill nicely, but it doesn't have to be that hook, actually. It doesn't really have to be anything good because I'm going to be cutting this bend, as opposed to using something such as a shank, like a Flyman shank from the Game Changer shanks, which I do use frequently. I think I like where those eyes are positioned. I typically position my eyes, which these are small dumbbell eyes. Typically I position my eyes about one eye length back from the hook bend, or sorry, the eye. So right about there. And these are just small nickel plated dumbbell eyes. You can use anything you want to get the weight you want. I like this because it gets the fly down a little bit, but swinging a fly, it's not gonna swing. It's not gonna drop it to the bottom, which is what I don't want. Typically, I'm actually achieving the depth I want through using tips with a Skagit line. A lot of times I'll even tie this fly with just bead chain eyes. You could even tie it with no eyes if you wanted to. I like the bead chain just because it kind of helps it break the surface of the water, but it's not going to drop it to the bottom, get it suspended and swinging. So you can experiment with the eye size you want. I would just caution you to stick to something that can be easily cast with whatever rod you're using. So if you're using a 3 or 4 weight, these eyes are about perfect. You could maybe go up a size, but I wouldn't go too much bigger. So what I'm tying in here, I kind of got it ready to go. This is stinger hook using Senyo's small intruder wire or trailer wire, and then Gamakatsu size 6 octopus hook. If you can see that there. And I put this together here and now before I tie it on, as opposed to tying the wire on and then attaching the hook later. Problem with that is then you have this hook that's extremely sharp hanging out the back. And I tie that, right above, about the hook point, a little bit further back. And then get that on top, get that hook point up, because I don't want it to hang up on the bottom. You could even, swing it so slow it's dragging through the bottom. And then I pull that back about one hook length, or a way to think about it is if I were to ever have to replace this hook, I theoretically could do it, but I've yet to ever have to do that because usually I lose the fly before that ever happens. However, the theory is out there. If that ever happened, I would have that option. So what I'm doing here is just quickly wrapping that back to the front of the eyes, and actually I tie these down. See if you can see that in front of the eye. Depends on how your preference or whatever, however you want to. Oh, and one other thing. It's a bit of foam. There you go. I've stuck myself a few times already. What that piece of foam does is keep me from hooking myself because this hook is super sticky. So wrap a few times in front, get that tight, and then one at a time, you can grab it. Wrap those X-wrap over the eyes and wrap that down. A few wraps, same thing on this side. If you can pull it. And then wrap that back. And the reason it gives it a bit more hook gap to, or hook length to sit on. And then you can, I usually use Zap-A-Gap, but today I got Loctite. Put a little bit on the eyes. Hold those eyes in place and then run that down, run a little bead down that wire. Glue it all in place. And then go to town. Usually what I do here, wrap one over the other. And you're not limited to tying this with a stinger hook if you don't want to. You could just fish this with a regular old hook. I might caution you to put the weight on the top of the hook and so it rides hook point up, but then your wing's going to have to go on the other side of the hook down here. So you might want to reverse that in your vise. So, but what I'm doing here is just wrapping that front, creating a good little landing platform for the end of this fly and what comes next. So, tied that all down. So, this fly, I've experimented with a lot of different materials over the years, and I kind of have come down to, I guess, 4, maybe 5 materials. First up, ice dub, pearl. You can use ice dub in any color you want. I always use pearl. I don't always use pearl. I use pearl frequently because I think it looks like the belly of a minnow. And I like that flash because we're going to be covering this up a bit. So ice dub is pretty flashy. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I'm going to tie that stacked clump of ice dub on the side closest to me. You don't have to get a whole lot. And then I'm going to take the other side, fold it over, and tie it on the other side. A little tail helps cover up that wire a little bit. It's not super necessary. And then tie that down. And then just same ice dub the body of this fly. You don't have to get too generally specific, just something to give it a little flash. Like I was saying earlier, I usually use that white ice dub. A lot of the time I think it looks like a minnow belly. However, there are times where I don't want so much flash, and I'll just use the dubbing that I'm going to cover the head with, which is going to be a leechy dubbing, semi-seal leech, seal X dubbing, which is what I'm going to use here, or anything else. Feel free to experiment with whatever you want this body to look like. So, once I get to this forward portion, right about there, I'm going to start crafting a dubbing ball. What that is essentially the back of a quote-unquote station. This fly has been heavily influenced by intruders. We just did a video, Rob just did a video of his thin mint Trout Spey intruder, which you can see on our YouTube channel. Check it out. But this is a single station fly because it's a small fly, but this part's kind of been influenced by intruders. So next up is guinea body, my favorite. I only ever use red. Feel free to use whatever color you want. The reason I use red is because I think it looks like gills, or the underneath side of the gill on a little baitfish or sculpin. This fly was also tied, developed and tied for local waters here in Colorado, so it's got a sculpin. This color is going to be a sculpin-y vibe, but you can use whatever you want to match whatever forage fish you want. Make sure we get that locked in there. And like I said, red for the underside of a gill. Usually about 3.5 wraps is what I do. 1, 2, It gets a little messy, that's fine. This isn't necessarily a wet fly. While I'm doing, what I try and do is as I'm wrapping it, I try and push those fibers back. And then I actually tie this off underneath because I like having this stem out of the way of the wing. 2, 3. Tie it down. Cut that. And with that ball, if I did it right, which sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, that ball of dubbing behind here, let's do this, see if I can't. Pull all those fibers back. If you can, don't tie back over the dubbing, but what you're trying to do is press that hackle up against that ball of dubbing so it flares a little bit. You know, best laid plans and all that, but it'll fish. And then, to give it a little barring, a little motion, whatever you want, I use Senyo's Predator Wrap. I grab about, for this fly, this size, I grab about 5, if I can. And I do exactly what I did with that tail, where I tie it on the side closest to me. And then I fold it over to the other side. Let's see if I can do this without shaking too bad. Might have drank too much coffee. Pull that over. Side, side. There you go, there you go. Get those eyes, I think. Alright, so I like how that looks. I like that it's sticking out sideways. I like how this fly finishes. If you saw this, you'll see what happens, but I like that wing to look stupid and stick out almost 90 degrees from the hook shank. So, you'll see why. Especially when you fish it. You'll see why. So, wing. What I'm using here is Arctic Foxtail. It's a tail round cut from an Arctic fox. We just got a whole pile of about 18 different colors of this stuff. And it is really vibrant. And I have been tying with it. It's been a fantastic material for us here at the shop, especially for streamers. And what I might actually do, I'm going to call an audible. We're going to make this a rainbow trout pattern. You'll see how I do that in a second. But first comes the olive. Grab a little clump. If you're using a single color, maybe a slightly bigger clump. Cut it close to the hide if you can. So, got my clump. If that were the only piece of, if this was the only color, I would actually probably grab a little bit more. Comb out the guard hairs if there's any. Pull out those loose hairs. And what I'm going to do, so kind of create a little bump here. That's not my favorite idea, but it happens. I'm going to try and tie this right on top, facing forward. Right on top of that little bump. Right there, on top, 1, 2. And you see this? Don't cut it. Leave it there. That's what helps keep this fly propped up. So I got just some pink here. I'm going to grab about the same amount, maybe a touch less. You can go a huge amount of Arctic Fox, or you can grab a little amount and kind of make it a wispy, light, low water fly. Great for steelhead, in fact. If you were to tie this, I would have used the large wire though, maybe a bigger hook. Large sinuous wire. So then I'm going to tie that right on top. Again. 1, 2. I don't and I try to keep those wraps on top of each other. So, we got our wing. And you notice I tied the olive in first, pink in second. That's going to fold back and look like a little rainbow trout. So, I got a buildup of thread underneath here. That's fine. I'm going to do 1, 2 wraps here. And then one thing that I've found, other than the little foam, the non-fly tying hack, is just a tiny, tiny little hair clip. And I'm afraid I'm going to lose this. What I'm doing here, take this, grab that, comb it back. Clip it around the hook shank. That just keeps everything out of the way. So you can kind of see how there's some bare thread underneath there. That's fine. We are going to manage that here next with a dubbing loop. So for this fly, I have used pretty heavily semi-seal for this part. What I'm doing is creating a dubbing loop using Loon's dubbing loop tool and not the gator grip part. This guy here. And created the dubbing loop. Now just wrap this forward. Try and even out any big bumps you might see up front here just to keep that even for the landing of the dubbing loop. Got my dubbing loop. Got my dubbing wax. Don't have to use dubbing wax. I do because I find it holds my dubbing in my dubbing loop when I'm working a little bit better. Dubbing wax. And today I am using olive brown UV2 Seal X dubbing. We got this here at the shop. All this stuff we got here at the shop. And I like this because, I don't know if you can, it's a little bit olive and a little bit red. Great for rainbow trout, but also it's almost a brown. It's my favorite dubbing for sculpins. Got our dubbing, and a little hack for bagged seal type dubbing or leech type dubbing. Just cut the corner off, pull it out that way. Gives you kind of a lined up clump of dubbing. Seal X is a great dubbing synthetic for leeches, streamer heads, streamers. But one thing about it is a lot longer than semi-seal or like the Arizona Diamond Dub. It's actually, in my mind, a bit too long, if you can see that. So what I do is kind of stack that up. I'm going to grab a little bit more than that. So what I'll do, pull a little bit of that out, not use it, is I'm actually going to take it, got my, I don't know what you want to call that, clump mustache, I cut it right in half. So now I got 2 clumps of that, and I'm just going to line those up again, and it's about 1 inch long, and then start taking clumps, lining up your dubbing loop. Line it up best you can, and then spin it. That starts to spin. And one thing I'll have on hand, because it always happens, is this is key. It's not happening yet, but a lot of times that dubbing from the loop will want to grab some of those guinea fibers or the predator wrap and twist it up in there. You can just quickly pick it up by just grabbing it, pulling it out. So got our dubbing loops kind of corded up right now. We're going to run, first of all, dubbing brush over it. Really tight fibers that don't want to get picked out, because you want this to have a pretty leechy head. And doing this, what I'm doing, bodkin, running it down the thread, grabbing those fibers, pulling, breaking my dubbing loop. Clutch little trick. What I didn't do too, 1 turn whip finish at the head for this, because we're going to use the rotary feature. Don't have to, it really helps. So what I was saying before I rudely interrupted myself with a dumb move, somehow breaking my thread, is that just pick this out. I'm just picking out the fibers of, running that along the side of the dubbing loop, picking out fibers. It's just going to, in the end, make it easier to brush out and pick out again. And rotary feature. And I always do a 3-turn. A lot of times I'll do this too. Pull off my clip. Got my hair. pulled off a little too soon. But make sure you wrap that 1, 2, at least 3 turns in front of that wing. Make sure that it stays on top. And then start X-wrapping over your eyes. Over the top. Try to get an even amount of wraps on the top and the bottom of your eyes if you can. And then 1. Tie off your dubbing loop. 3 turns ought to do it, but I always lock in with a few turns in front. Cut your loop, salvaged by your hackle pliers. Comb it all back with your fingers. Fingers is fine. This is one reason why we have the foam, because this is where I've stuck myself far too many times. And just tidy that up with a neat little head, best you can, trying to get those fibers to lay down flat. But they're also binding that loop pretty well, that dubbing loop. And then, you know, couple turn whip finish. Decent. So, it's not about the head anyway. Kind of look, you could fish that, looks fine. But I am one who likes bugginess, so I start with my dubbing brush. But if you want to be a little bit more of a perfectionist, like I tend to be, bodkin, pick. Take care not to pick out this wing. Don't dig in there, because what will happen if you dig in too deep, you'll actually get underneath your thread wraps and maybe loosen your dubbing loop and have a problem. You might pull that wing underneath your dubbing loop into a weird spot. You don't want it. There is the Karl Malone. A few more steps. Number 1, since we've picked it out, I wait to pick out my dubbing loop before I do this. I'm a fan of super glue rather than head cement. So just get a little super glue, Zap-A-Gap being my favorite, Loctite second favorite. Since this is an intruder stinger style hook, and we're going to just cut it, be sure not to cut your wire, so look at it, make sure you're not covering that wire. Give it a little. First thing you'll notice, the wing looks like a troll doll. Doesn't have a lot of bin appeal as far as, I told you I would stick myself. Doesn't have a lot of bin appeal as far as, you know, you look at this and you're like, that thing looks stupid. The point is, when you get this wet and you pull it out of the water, it's all going to slick back smaller than a pencil. It's going to be small out of the water. Inside the water, this wing, it's a big-bodied looking bug. So go swing it on your favorite trout water. Let me know what you think in the comments. Check us out online, Duranglers.com, or shoot us a call, 970-385-4081. Let us know what you think. Thanks. Oh, don't forget to subscribe. That's what all the YouTubers say, right?